What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Jake Talks Wrestling. Today we're here, we're going to talk about a little something that's kind of just been playing on my mind for a few days. Now, before we get into it, I am quite aware that of late I've been a bit WWE bad, AEW good. Especially after my last few videos have been like, WWE ID is bad, AEW Revolution was good. And people who find this channel typically find it on a video where I say AEW, where I talk about one of these things, and, you know, shout at me. I am very aware of it. I'm not trying to be like that. I'm just going to say this up front. Not that I really should, but like for me, wrestling is something I love so much. I want to talk about wrestling. I want to cover wrestling. I want to speak about wrestling to the people who watch. And I just want to talk about things in wrestling, whether it's good, whether it's bad. And right now, at the moment, WWE is confusing. The WrestleMania build is odd, and I don't know if I like it. And I've been feeling this way for a wee while, and I feel like after this week's Raw, that's kind of been solidified. So, as I sit and record this at 9 o'clock on Thursday night, I've had a few days to sort of digest the main event of Raw and everything that's kind of happened on Raw, as well as digest, you know, the fallout from the Elimination Chamber and, you know, your SmackDowns and your Raws and everything there. And even with some things that have been happening in NXT, just stuff like that. And the more I kind of think about it, the more I look at it, the more, like I say, confused I am by the build. And I don't just mean in terms of, you know, Jey Uso winning the Royal Rumble. I mean, just in general, I think a lot of this feels very confusing. And I'm just going to kind of run over the things that are in the back of my mind, the things that are kind of nagging at me, and the things that are, to me anyway, feel a little bit unfinished, unsettled, and just sort of at odds with a good, cohesive WrestleMania build, I guess. So, where better to start than start with this week's Monday Night Raw. On Raw this week, the show finished, of course, with that huge main event, CM Punk and Seth Rollins in the steel cage. I thought it was a good match. I've seen a lot of people being like, "What, steel cage was better?" And it's not particularly close. But that's just besides the point. Obviously, one was given a lot more time. One was on a pay-per-view where you have a lot less time constraints, and I understand that Raw does have less time constraints with it being on Netflix, and I understand as well, you know, a lot more freedom is going to be given on a pay-per-view for a big blow-off as opposed to doing it on a Raw. I do think both matches were great though, and I think if people want to sit and compare, they were two completely different matches for completely different audiences with completely different wrestlers and in completely different stories. Personally, I really enjoyed the Ospreay and Fletcher match. We've been over this if you watch my Revolution video, but let's just start with the end of Raw. Raw finished with Seth Rollins beating CM Punk in that match. Well, it really beat CM Punk because Roman Reigns returned as Seth was sitting with the door open, basically goading Punk to say, "On you go, you can quit at any time, you can leave at any time, try and get past me." He's dragged out the cage by Roman Reigns, who then puts the boots to him. Just kills him, drops him with a Superman punch and a spear and a curb stomp. And while all that's happening, Punk is in the ring with Heyman, and then Roman comes in, snaps, baits the fuck out of Punk, which seemingly sets up the triple threat at WrestleMania: Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and CM Punk. And I have to ask, why? Obviously, I understand on paper there is the eternal rivalry between Rollins and Roman. You have the rivalry with Rollins and Punk that has been brewing ever since Punk came back. You also have the fact that obviously Punk owes Heyman a favour. There is the sort of the bloodline going into War Games sort of tension between Roman and Punk that was teased through that. Obviously, again, like I mentioned, Heyman's favour that he owes Punk for doing that for him. You also have Punk's history as a Paul Heyman guy, both on screen and behind the scenes. Obviously, Heyman was a guy who really went to bat for Punk in WWE CW, and then was paired up with him on screen towards the end of his original run in WWE. And obviously, Heyman is Roman's wise man. Heyman has been Roman's mouthpiece. And you know, a really big part of what made early Bloodline Tribal Chief Roman so special. So, all three of them are good and interesting foils for each other. However, there is not an interesting story to be told between the three of them. Whereas, you look at last summer, whilst everyone was clamouring for the Seth, Drew and Punk triple threat, because Drew and Seth legitimately do not like Punk. Drew and Seth also had an on-screen rivalry, which obviously led to their match at WrestleMania last year, where Drew won the title to then be screwed out of it by Punk. There has been story threads between all three of them, individually, with each other, with one another, and there's enough there and enough of a build there with everything that has been going on, to the point that match felt like it could and should have happened at any point in time, and no one really would have been that mad at it. Obviously they did it. You had the three of them in the ring where Seth was the special referee, but in terms of a triple threat between the three of them, intertwining all of those stories, we never got that. And I think that was a massive missed opportunity. And you look at this here, whilst there is obviously story threads between all three of them individually, there's no real kind of underlying thread that ties all three together. The fact that Drew and Seth were Punk's two biggest haters. Drew and Seth wrestled at Mania with Punk on commentary. Drew beats an injured Seth to win it, and then he's cost his title by Punk. Like, all of those things tied those three together. Whereas this is, you have a Roman and Seth story, you have a Seth and Punk story, you have a Roman and Punk story. We do not have a Roman Punk Seth story, and I understand we've essentially only really just confirmed this now, but it doesn't strike me as an entirely interesting concept for a Mania match, and I don't know how much I'm into it. And now I've seen people online throwing around the idea of Heyman turning on both men to side with Rollins, and that also just doesn't work. Rollins doesn't need a mouthpiece, and Rollins doesn't feel like a Paul Heyman guy. I've seen people say, what if Rollins and Becky went as like on a power trip as the big evil couple at the top, and with Heyman's backing, that could be interesting. But again, I don't find that particularly interesting, because Heyman's thing forever has been, at least on screen, attaching himself to the sort of the hottest commodity, they can't miss. And I understand we had some misses, obviously you had like Curtis Axel and things like that, but typically you think of him with Brock, you think of him with Roman, and you think of him with Punk as well. Three sort of well solidified guys who, especially in the iterations that went as Paul Heyman guys, they're not people who can comfortably eat a loss. And Rollins is a guy who's essentially, over the years become a guy who can eat losses without really tanking his credibility. And not to say that's a bad thing, that just to me doesn't immediately scream Paul Heyman guy. And on top of that, I have no desire to see Seth Rollins as a Paul Heyman guy. I think as an idea, if Heyman turns on both of his guys in that match at Mania to side with Seth, that's going to be interesting for about 3 weeks. I'm not into it at all. I don't buy into it whatsoever. On top of that, if we are going to put CM Punk in a big headline triple threat match at WrestleMania, why not have it be with two people that it makes sense to have him in there with, in Cena and Cody? Cena, obviously his greatest rival of all time. Cody, the face of the company, who's main evented WrestleMania, is the guy who's in the position that Punk wants to be. Punk has made no secret of wanting to be in that position. And we can also, without out and out saying the name, there is a history there. They were both in AEW, and they're probably arguably the two biggest signings in AEW history. And on top of that, they are the two biggest signings back to WWE in the last few years. There is a lot of story potential tying all three men together. And as well, with Cena and Cody, there is a lot tying them together. And you can do that triple threat, and it is much more interesting than this triple threat, because you have the current face of the company, you have the former face of the company, and the guy who all he wants is to be the face of the company. That is a much more interesting match than this one. Another person whose position on the WrestleMania card does sort of confuse me is Bianca Belair. Now, I love Bianca. Bianca is she is the greatest Performance Center success story, to the fact that she's probably always going to be the measuring stick for the Performance Center, to the detriment of literally everyone else coming through the Performance Center. That's how fucking good Bianca Belair is. And then obviously she was in the team with Jade, which I've been on record as saying I never really thought was such a great idea. I had my thoughts on what I thought they should have done going into this WrestleMania a year ago when I tried to predict the card way too early. But in general, I think I never thought it was the best idea. Then obviously there was the Jade injury and her writing her off TV, and then she partnered with Naomi, and then it was revealed that Naomi actually turned on Jade and she attacked Jade. And now we have this story going on where we have, you know, Jade and Naomi and Bianca, they're all embroiled in this thing with, you know, Bianca in the middle and Jade and Naomi set to clash, and who's Bianca going to choose and whose side is she going to be on? Is she going to turn on one of them and wrestle the other at WrestleMania? No, because she won the Elimination Chamber and she's going to be wrestling Io and probably also Rhea, which takes all of the fucking wind out of the sails of the Naomi and Jade story. And if you put that match on WrestleMania, which 2-night card, there's a chance they're going to put that match on WrestleMania, what does it matter without the main player in that feud, in Bianca Belair, in another match? Even if you do it on a separate night, all of the wind and all of the momentum is gone from that, because Bianca has spent her Mania build, even if she's involved in both stories, we're only going to think of her as wrestling for that championship. And I do think there's an interesting story to be told between Bianca and Jade and Naomi, but it's a much less interesting story if Bianca is elsewhere. And if you put these guys on WrestleMania, it kind of feels like they went, this feud and this story should be on WrestleMania, but we're just going to give them the match, but to say sorry, we've put her in something else. And that's kind of what a lot of this Mania card feels like to me. It feels like stories that they're like, this is a Mania story, but in the case of Jade and Naomi, they're just kind of giving them the scraps and saying sorry that we've taken the main part of the story out of the equation. And listen, if it doesn't end up on Mania, I don't think it's going to be the end of the world, but I also think that is a bit of a disservice to the good work that Bianca and Jade were doing before Jade was written off, and then also the good work that Bianca and Naomi were doing after that. And especially, it's a disservice to the work that Naomi's done, like, of, you know, I know we're not too far out of Elimination Chamber, but, you know, that promo was fantastic. And if you just dump this on Mania without Bianca being fully involved, that's not good for anyone involved. And if we wait to let this go to the next pay-per-view where we can get Bianca involved, we run the risk of this going stale. I also think, now listen, I make no secrets on the fact I don't like Jey Uso. I don't get it. He is a good to fine tag team guy. I do not like him as a singles wrestler. I like him as a promo guy, but not anymore. I understand why, but at the same time, and I understand this is, you know, within the Triple H era, so you can't really compare him to like a Rusev or R-Truth or a Zack Ryder or a Dolph Ziggler or all these guys who got over the crowd and seem like got punished for being over the crowd. We can compare him to LA Knight, and we can say if Jey Uso moving that much merch and getting everyone to do his fucking catchphrase is enough to justify a Royal Rumble win, why couldn't we at least give LA Knight the Money in the Bank? And apart from, you know, my just general, I've made my thoughts clear on Jey Uso many times on this channel. Again, another confusing build. He's wrestled Gunther, I think, 3 times now. He's been beaten 3 times now. And he was beaten, a week before the Rumble by Gunther? So, we've never been given a reason to believe he can beat him. I don't think they are interesting foils for each other. Every promo Gunther cuts on TV is just basically him saying, I do not respect you, you are not worthy of my time, and I have proven that before by beating you every single time that you have stepped up. I've put you back down. It's a baffling build to give the Royal Rumble winner, and fair enough if you have the Cody and Cena stuff and you have the Punk and Roman and Seth stuff, which are much more interesting matches, even though I don't particularly think Punk, Roman and Seth is all that interesting. Again, you're just burying the Rumble winning story and just letting them coast until Mania. And again, out with my Jey Uso hate aside, it's not an interesting story being told. And I think when you look at a lot of the matches that are set or appear to be set or they look like they're going to go in that direction, I've quite a few of them feel this way. And I think putting Sami and Kevin onto Elimination Chamber to get them a match in Canada was good, but now what did either of those men do at WrestleMania? You know, I think Logan Paul versus AJ Styles, again, what's the point? Why should we invest in this? And I understand, I thought Logan was cool. At first I liked him in the ring, but obviously just being Logan Paul and, you know, being transphobic and crypto scam and all these things, but just totally apart from that, just if we're just looking at professional wrestler Logan Paul, I'm bored. He is slowly becoming end of WWE Ricochet to me. Oh, look, he's doing cool moves. It's a promo I don't care about. Oh, look, he's doing cool moves. Oh, that's a bad promo. Oh, look, he's doing, like, I don't buy it the way I once did. I was fairly into his run as US champ, even though it was obviously like 4 or 5 matches or whatever. And I was really into the match he had at Mania last year. I was really into the LA Knight feud. But since then, I've struggled to care about almost everything he's done. And again, what interesting story is there with AJ Styles here? Now, we have about a month. We've got like 4 weeks of TV still to go. But is that enough to make me care about all of these stories? And is that enough time to sort of course correct on all of these stories, especially when WrestleMania hasn't sold out yet? I don't know the exact figure, but there's a lot of talk that it's 5 figures at least, so it's apparently around 20,000 odd tickets haven't been sold. And that may be due to the fact that Vegas is 1, hard to get to, and 2, fucking extortionate. But it just, to me, seems like they kind of thought last year's Mania was such a huge success, people will just buy Mania tickets no matter what. And then as we got closer and closer, they realised, shit, we need to actually start planning Mania and putting all of this into motion. And I also think maybe Triple H heard a lot of the criticisms of essentially booking 2 WrestleManias ahead to get Cody's big moment after he didn't win at 39, and sort of booking so far ahead. And obviously Triple H is, I spoke about it in my changes I would make to WWE, Triple H needs to learn when to pull the plug. Triple H is such a long-term booker, and that kind of probably comes from his time in NXT when he was taping sort of 8 weeks of TV in a row, and you could sort of plan all that time ahead and all that time in advance. But maybe he just said, let's try this. Let's not think so far in the future. Let's leave our options open. But by leaving his options open and refusing to sort of make any real decisions until we are now, less than a month from WrestleMania, it's hurt the WrestleMania build for me. And to me, the big question in my mind is, are they going to sell at WrestleMania? Because right now they're not on course to. There is a hell of a lot of tickets still to go, and a lot of these stories are very confusing. And I understand, obviously, we need to watch next week, and we need to watch on Friday, and we need to see what happens in Brussels, and see what happens in Glasgow, and see what happens in all these shows as we build to it, because the story's not told yet. But I can't even really tell where a lot of these go. And in the case of where I can't tell where these go, I'm left thinking, why should I care? Because why, apart from the fact that it's Roman and Rollins and Punk, which I care about that because it's Roman and Rollins and Punk, I don't care about that because it's the character. I care about that because it's, as a fan of wrestling, I care about that as Roman, Rollins and Punk. But as a fan of the product, I don't care about that because it's Roman, Rollins and Punk, if that makes sense. So I understand I've kind of came on here and I've just yapped and rambled with no notes and sort of kind of probably gone over some points kind of repeatedly here. But I just think, I don't want to say it's harming the WrestleMania build, because it's not. But at the same time, to me, they are not doing enough to shift those remaining 15,000 tickets or whatever it is. For me, if I lived 3 hours outside of Vegas and I found the really cheap tickets, I'd go, hell yeah, let's do it. But if I lived that little bit further from Vegas, so let's just say, for example, from where I am in Glasgow, it's about a 3-ish hour drive to Manchester. And I mean, I understand that I'm a bad example, because if there was a big fucking wrestling show in Manchester, I would go. I've been to both All Ins at Wembley. But like, if I was a kind of more casual, more checked out fan, was watching on Netflix, like, this is kind of cool, and there was a big show in London, and it's obviously it's a bit more of an ask to get down to London. I don't know if the current build for Mania would be enough to get me to go if I was slightly more checked out. And that's where this is going to go wrong for them, I think. Their refusal to iron these plans out and have them nailed down in advance and sort of be like, let's just see where the road takes us. They've left it too long. They've let us go down the road a little bit too long, and it just feels very blurry and muddy and confusing at the minute. And I hope that changes, because I'm against all my better instinct, I'm very excited for this year's WrestleMania, apart from one match, but you know that. But yeah, that's it for me tonight. Just a little bit of a ramble and a yap and a gab. This will go up tomorrow, Friday. So when this goes up, we'll have SmackDown tonight. Hopefully we get, again, all these stories kind of talked about are sort of Raw-centric stories. We'll see if SmackDown maybe has a little bit more cohesion going forward and what they're setting up. But that's it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think of this Mania build down below. Let me know what you think's going on. If you think there's any ways that can be improved, or you think I'm maybe just being a little bit too reactionary too early. Wouldn't say it's too early. We're 4 weeks out from Mania. But yeah, no. Let me know what you guys think down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Share us around to all your friends. Let them know about the handsome man on YouTube with good wrestling opinions. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.